Hello, and welcome back to my podcast. I'm recording today, which means that I'm hopefully going to be back on my upload schedule. So yay for me. It's been a rough couple of weeks, so I'll take any small win I can get. Just hanging on to those little victories, as sometimes we have to. But that's enough about me. Today we're going to be talking about how your childhood can potentially affect your adult relationships. Now, if you're thinking this isn't for me, I can't relate at all, then you should stick around for sure because you might be surprised by what I say. This is a topic that especially hits close to home for me. I had some established behavior patterns that were affecting my relationships that I didn't realize but eventually did realize had stemmed from my childhood. And it's still something that is an ongoing work in progress for me. And I think that most people have these kind of behavioral patterns that are established from their time as a child. As you probably know, but probably don't often think about, humans are really creatures of habit, and all of our habits are learned. Basically, all of our behaviors are learned behaviors. I mean, apart from the very basic things like, survival kind of things like drinking water, eating, breathing, etc. And I truly believe that we are largely unaware of these learned behaviors or habits that we've developed because it's not something that we're consciously aware of or something that we're even thinking about on a regular basis unless we actually dissect things and look deeper. And I think that identifying these things is really important for personal progression and personal growth. So we're going to talk a bit about that today, and we're going to talk about how to identify if you have any of these undesirable behavioral patterns and what you can do to start working on them and start growing in that way. So first I'm going to talk about behavioral development as a child. And basically from the time that, our eyes have developed enough that we can actually see and we can hear, we are absorbing everything around us. And I know that a lot of people have been compared to their parents, much to their dismay. But this is really true because, that's where we learn our behaviors from is our parents. But being able to establish these traits that we do not wish to carry on is the first step to actually breaking them. From the time that we can move and we can express ourselves and we can actually understand what's going on in the world around us, we are emulating what we have seen. We mimic everything. That's how we learn basically everything, how to feed yourself, how to clean yourself, and basically all the instincts that we need to survive and all of the behaviors that we need to grow, we are learning from the people around us. And not all of these learned traits are really obvious to us. A lot of people are oblivious, like you might be in a relationship or you may have had relationships and your relationships break down for the same reason, or you have like a pattern in relationships. And that could be due to the fact that you have learned behaviors from when you were a child that you are completely unaware of. Or you may be aware of the behavior, or you may be aware of the pattern, but not understand where it's coming from. So right now I'm going to talk about some common causes and effects and behaviors that some people develop, and maybe you have, I know I for sure have, that can prevent you from really having the type of healthy adult relationship that most people aspire to. And the first one that I will mention, and one that personally affects me very deeply, is fear of abandonment. If as a child, one of the adults in your life walked away or wasn't consistently available, or perhaps you were adopted or something similar to that, then you might also have a fear of abandonment. And it can be very crippling in a healthy relationship or whilst trying to have a healthy relationship. because it's extremely difficult as a person who has a fear of abandonment not to project that onto their relationship. Or someone with a fear of abandonment might kind of avoid getting into a relationship where they have to depend on someone at all. For someone with this particular issue, it's extremely difficult to get close to someone and trust them and be open or vulnerable, which of course are all necessary ingredients for a healthy relationship. And that's not just romantic partners, it's for friendships too. And the next one I want to talk about is people who had a single parent or undependable adults in their life. And that's not just parents, that's, guardians as well. And I have nothing against single parents at all. I have nothing but respect for them. But as a child growing up, if you saw someone struggling that much, then it might lead to an inability to depend on someone. Because as you're growing up, if it's just you and your parent against the world, it can kind of teach you that it's not easy or not good to depend on someone else, because you never know if they're coming or going. And both of these issues that I just mentioned can lead to something that is even more damaging on a personal level. Because if you're someone who has fear of abandonment or someone who has kind of trust issues or issues depending on someone, if you did establish that type of relationship, you might stay in a relationship that's not good for you. You might stay with the wrong person because, you don't want to have to do that all over again. The fear of starting from the beginning and trying to trust someone over again, even if the person that you're with isn't right for you. You might also stay in a relationship that's wrong for you if you saw your parents doing that. I know a lot of parents, especially like baby boomer parents, stayed in relationships when they probably shouldn't have until their children were out of high school or in college, or, they set a deadline for it. Or if as a child you had an adult in your life who was down on you a lot, you might think that you don't deserve better. But I'm here to tell you that you don't need to stay in a bad relationship or a relationship where you are unhappy for any reason. You are worth more. Now, if you are someone who was raised in a family that was in, your parents were in not a good relationship, then you might have another problem, which is being overly argumentative or doing too much damage when you do argue. And that's a big one, because if you grew up watching people argue all the time, you might either be overly argumentative or you might completely avoid conflict at all. And conflict is necessary for a healthy relationship. You're never going to find a person that you agree with 100% of the time. And it is okay and it is healthy to have disagreements. It's healthy to sometimes argue. Where it gets unhealthy is if there's constant fights, if there's too much fighting, and also if you're saying really nasty things or someone is saying really nasty things to you in the relationship. And another cause for being overly argumentative could be that you were raised in a house that was really chaotic and really noisy, and you might be a person who needs more personal time and time to yourself and time to just be away from everything. If you're a person who was raised in a really chaotic household, and it's hard sometimes for some people to respect that space, especially if you're living together. So you may become easily annoyed for basically no reason. If you're a person who's just kind of more introverted and wanting more time to yourself, and your partner is just kind of like a happy-go-lucky, bubbly person who wants to cuddle all the time, then that's going to cause big problems in a relationship. And also, people who didn't have healthy role models as children, firstly, it's hard for them to fight because they don't know how. They don't know how to fight in a healthy way. And also, they have an extremely difficult time making up. If you didn't see your parents arguing and then making up, Not that children should be witnessing that precisely, but you don't know how to argue. And knowing how to argue as an adult is extremely important, because you have to be able to get your point of view across, and you also have to be able to listen to your partner's point of view. You have to know when to press pause and take a break, and you have to know how to make up after a fight, especially if it's a big one. But being unable to fight properly and fight fair and make up is actually a really difficult thing to do, and it's not something that you only learn as a child. It's something that you develop as you grow older. And if you're a person who doesn't fight fair, or you have a partner who doesn't fight fair, then you know how frustrating that is. And if it's a skill that you don't have right now, it's extremely important to develop that skill, because fighting fair is one of the main keys to a healthy relationship, because you are gonna fight, you are going to argue, but you want to do it in a productive, constructive way. People get upset sometimes and they just start hurling nasty words and insults, and that's hard to come back from, especially if it happens too much. Now, if you're someone like me, I hate pressing pause on an argument. I don't care how pissed off everybody is. I don't like to stop an argument. I want it to be worked through and finished and fixed, and everything to be out in the open, like instantaneously. But that's not the correct way to do things, no matter how hard it is for me, because I'm a very impatient person by nature. And honestly, I don't know when to stop sometimes. It's an ongoing learning process for me, and it's something that I'm still working on. And none of these things can be fixed immediately or overnight or something like that. They all take time. You know, you've had these habits since you were a child, since probably before you can even remember, you started developing these habits. So it's not an overnight thing to break it. And everything that I've mentioned so far can really lead someone to a fear of commitment. Committing is hard. Being in a relationship is hard. Building a relationship and a strong foundation with someone is hard. Trusting people is hard, and being vulnerable is hard. So why bother committing at all? And I'm pretty sure most of us know someone who has a fear of commitment. You know, I've known quite a few through my lifetime, and I guarantee that I will know more. I'm talking about the people who quit as soon as things start getting a bit serious. And there are a lot of them, and I understand the fear there. But I will tell you, there is hope for us all. But one of the worst things, and unfortunately super common things in relationships, is that someone is trying to change their partner. Every time I hear about someone trying to change their partner, it reminds me of that musical, I Love You, You're Perfect, Now Change. It's natural and completely desirable to grow as a person with your partner, and that's something I'm going to be addressing in probably my next podcast, but don't quote me on that. Because having a partner can actually be really amazing for self-growth, but you don't want to change the person that you're with. You don't want to change the core of who they are. You don't want them to change what you love about them. Every person on the planet has flaws, and apart from these things that I'm talking about now, which are ways that you can improve yourself, or ways even that you could help your partner improve if it's your partner who's suffering from one of these things, then it's not going to be a good thing to try to change who they are and to remove their flaws, because it's not a sustainable thing to do. It's not sustainable to ask your partner to not be flawed. For example, if your partner loves cars and you're not into cars and you want your partner to stop about the cars, that's really not something that is going to be sustainable long term, because you're asking your partner to change fundamentally who they are. And not only is it not right for you to expect that of someone, I mean, it's just going to be an impossible task for you, leading to the road of extreme frustration. Not that living cars is a flaw at all, but you get the point. There are some things that people can work on and become better, and there are some things that you just have to accept in your partner. So if you're struggling with any of these behaviors, then the first thing that you should do is try to look back to your childhood and kind of establish when you learned this behavior or how you learned this behavior. Because being able to pinpoint a problem makes it a lot easier, and knowing how you learned a behavior makes it a lot easier to unlearn it. Because most of the things that I mentioned are extremely detrimental to a healthy relationship as an adult. And again, I'm not talking about simply romantic relationships, I'm talking about friendships too. And it's not just for the benefit of relationships, it's for the benefit of each individual person, because having some of these issues can be really, really hard. For someone, they might be feeling insecure or unable to trust people, and it's really hard, internally to have those sorts of feelings. So if you find yourself kind of stuck in these behavioral patterns, looking back to your childhood and when you may have learned these behaviors and identifying the behaviors that you have learned that you would like to unlearn is really the first step. And once you understand what's going on, then communication is key. Your partner needs to know. Your partner needs to know what you're going through, what you've identified, and what you're working on, especially if it's a hot button issue in your relationship. But what's important for you to understand and what's important for your partner to understand is that this is not an overnight process. It is a process. You have to be able to set a target in your mind so that you can notice when you are doing these unwanted behaviors. Because a lot of times these things arise when we're emotional, and it's a lot harder at that point to identify that we're doing the unwanted behavior. So you need to make sure that you talk to your partner about that too, because sometimes it's not so easy. It's a lot easier in hindsight, but it's not so easy in the moment to be able to identify that we're doing the behavior. So that might be something that you ask someone that you're in a relationship with, whether it be your partner or a friend, etc., to point out to you when you're doing the behavior, which can be so. It really depends on your relationship, if you can handle that, if you're a person who can handle when someone is pointing out something that you're doing that they don't like and that you're trying to change. Because especially if you're in an emotional state, it can be something that is, adding fuel to the fire. But at least you for yourself need to be able to start identifying when you do the unwanted behavior. And that's the first step. Not the first step, but that's kind of the third step in undoing the learned behavior. You want to unlearn that. And the next step, and maybe the hardest step, is holding yourself accountable. It's an extremely hard thing to do, I think, for most people, to hold yourself accountable for something. We humans do not like to be wrong. And when we humans are wrong, mostly we don't like to admit when we're wrong. But if you don't hold yourself accountable for these behaviors, when you do them, then it's not going to be helpful for you when you're trying to stop doing them. And you don't need someone else to hold you accountable for something when you can hold yourself accountable. You can hold up your hands and know that you did something that you have been trying to change, and that will help you change faster. None of these things is an overnight process. Learned behaviors take a long time to learn, and then you practice them your whole life until now. And now you're trying to unlearn them, which is a process. So give yourself time, be forgiving with yourself, and give yourself space to make this growth. But at the same time, hold yourself accountable. When you do slip up and you do something that you're not proud of, hold yourself accountable for that. at least internally, and that will really help give you incentive to change. And if you're having problems in a relationship right now, I would highly recommend for you to talk to the person that you're in a relationship with. Kind of talk to them if you're feeling frustrated about things, if you're feeling apprehensive about things, if you're struggling with these things, talk to someone. And if you're a person who just really can't talk, then, like I say on almost every single podcast, keep a journal. That will really help you establish patterns, and it will help you to hold yourself accountable when you make mistakes. And if you're trying to change any of these behavioral patterns, you will make mistakes. And that's okay, because you're growing and you're learning, and it's part of being human to make mistakes. So don't expect yourself to be perfect if you've pinpointed where this learned behavior has come from, because it's not going to happen. So when you do slip up, it's okay. Take a breath, forgive yourself, dust yourself off, and try again. And that's all I have for you today. If you've enjoyed listening to this, then please follow me or subscribe, depending on what platform you're listening on. And if you'd like to reach out to me, my website will be in the description box, as well as my social media. So give me a shout, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.